strike a translucent object, we saw that little light passes through, and even the little light passes through is scattered. That's why we are unable to see clear images through the translucent objects. Then we have the opaque objects. Their light rays are blocked. The light rays are blocked, completely are blocked. Okay? And if you're illustrating that, please remember they can still bring this. They can still bring this. Then the first thing they ask you is to name material. Don't forget to put the arrows, is to name material X. Then if you see that the light rays, they're not showing that light rays are going through, then this is an opaque object. Okay? So the light rays are completely what? They are blocked. I told you what can happen here. Light rays can be dispersed, they can be reflected depending on the nature of the material. Now, then part C, transparent object. Transparent object. All light rays will pass through. Okay, we are saying all light passes through. We are saying all light passes through, and this is what happens. All light passes through. Okay, I beg to use a ruler because I need to represent exactly the ray. Okay, the number of rays doesn't matter. So the light rays will pass through unchanged. Okay, so if we are to name material Y, then this is a transparent object. They are saying what happens when light rays strike the transparent object. And here we are saying that all light passes through, like you see that, you see on the illustration. So that was C of that number. And number 2, they are saying in the space below, draw a converging beam. A converging beam, or a convergent beam. And that is very clear. The illustration is there on the board. Okay, the light rays come from the source and meet at one point. That's the point of focus or the focal point. They are coming. In other words, they are converging. They move from different directions, and all of them meet at one point. That is, if you're asked to draw the converging beam, that is how it looks like. And then for diverging beam, in case they ask you to illustrate the diverging beam, remember here, the diverging, they come from one point and then they spread out. They move out. They move in different directions, like you see there. So this is a converging beam, and we have, this is a diverging beam. It's very important to observe the direction of the arrows. Okay, the direction of the arrows. Hope you've got that very clear. Now, that was the activity that I left behind, and most of you actually got everything right. Thanks so much. Now, I want us to move to something very else, but connected here to what happens, especially when we are dealing with the opaque objects. Whenever light is traveling, or when the light is moving, and when it meets an opaque object, light will be blocked. And when that light is blocked, what happens? A shadow is formed. A shadow is formed. As you see in that illustration, that's an example of a shadow. I want you to see on your screen. Those are some of the shadows that were formed. Okay, those are shadows that were formed, and you must have observed that during day, or when you move out in the if you move out during day when the sun is still there, you'll observe something. If you look at the ground, you'll observe something that looks like your body, and that's a shadow. Okay, now let's continue and look at, we need to define what a shadow is, and we also need to know more about shadows, the characteristics of shadows. Now, when you're asked to define a shadow is a dark region formed when light is obstructed by an opaque object. Is a shadow formed when light is obstructed by an opaque object? For instance, if you look at this opaque object, so when this, let's say for example this one here, when light rays are blocked, then a shadow will be formed here. Depending on the position of the light. If it is up, if it is this way, the shadow will be this side. And if the source of light is this side, then the shadow will be this side. Okay, it depends on the position of the source of light. So a shadow is a dark region formed when light is obstructed by an opaque object. Or you can also say is a region of darkness caused by obstruction of light by an opaque object. So the moment an opaque object obstructs the light, then what will be formed is a shadow. And please remember that shadows take the shape of the object. Is that okay? If it is the tree which is an opaque object, then the shadow will be in that shape. It will look like that tree. Okay? And if you're a human being and you stand in the light, you will see a shadow resembling your body. And if you're a human body and you see a shadow of a cow, then you should check yourself. Okay? Now, let's see how shadows are formed. We are looking at the formation of shadows. Shadows are formed when light rays are obstructed or blocked by an opaque object. And that's a question I've answered for you. How are shadows formed? They always ask you that. Shadows are formed when light rays are obstructed or blocked. Is that okay? They are obstructed or blocked by an opaque object. And shadows are formed because light travels in a straight line. That's the principle that enables the formation of a shadow, because light travels in a straight line. That's why shadows are formed. I want to give you an example here. If you look at this paper here, I think you are able to see on the board. Okay? You see that this is a paper, but light is coming from up. And because light does not move around the corners, that's why you see a shadow on the board. You're seeing a shadow on the board? Yes, because light travels in a straight line. The shadow is formed because light was blocked here by this opaque object. Well, now, when looking at shadows, there are mainly two types of shadows, and that is what we look at in primary. We don't go beyond that, but mainly we look at three. If you advance and go to other steps, when you go to other levels, you'll see more other types. But here we mainly look at two types, that is umbra and penumbra. That is the umbra and penumbra. Now, umbra, that is the total shadow or total darkness. It's the region, it is the darkest part or region of a shadow. And it is formed by total obstruction of light, like you see on the board. Then the other part is the penumbra. Penumbra is the lighter region of the shadow. That one is formed by partial obstruction of light. So the shadow has got two regions, that is the umbra and the penumbra. Is that okay? The darkest part is the umbra. Then the lighter part or the lighter region of the shadow is the penumbra. Please get that clear. Those are the parts of the shadow. And if you look at the other diagram on your right, it is showing you the penumbra and the umbra. Umbra is that darkest part or the darkest region. Hope we are moving together. Now, if they ask you how is the penumbra formed, it is formed by total obstruction of light. And how is penumbra formed? It is formed by partial obstruction of light. Hope we are together. Now, let's move on and look at the formation of a shadow in different objects. Let's start with the torch and see how surely shadows are formed. Now, if you have a torch and you complete the circuit, I'm saying when you switch on, or when you turn the switch on, when you close that switch, then the circuit will be complete and it will produce the light. Now, that is the shape of the opaque object. So when light meets the opaque object, light will be blocked, and we are going to see the shadow formed. And the shadow, I told you, it takes the shape of the object. Are we together? Now, let's continue and see how the shadow is going to be formed. And we are going to see the two regions, that is the darkest and the light. We are going to see the dark region and the lighter region of the shadow. Let's continue. We need to see that. Let's continue and see exactly. So that is what happens. A shadow will be formed, but it will have two regions. The dark region is there, that is the umbra, and the lighter region, which is the penumbra. Now, let's continue and look at other shadows. Let's look at other shadows. Hope you've got that clear. We can proceed to other shadows such that my people get to know. Now, look at that is the shape of the opaque object. So, when the torch is on, what is going to happen? You will see that the shadow will be formed the other side. Then, now let me show you the one for the human being, that is a person. Now, we continue, we look at the next, that is the human being. You see that the shadow will be like for the human being. Is that okay? We are going to use the same torch and then to produce the light, and we need to observe what is going to happen. So, what is going to happen? Your human body is an opaque object, and once it blocks the light, you've seen what has happened on the other side. The shadow is formed. Now, this is very important for you to note. I want you to note this. The edge, all border of a shadow which is lighter is what we call the penumbra. And the center of a shadow which is dark is called umbra. We've already seen that. Let's continue. The size of a shadow is determined. Hope you're getting me clearly here. The size of the shadow is determined by the distance of an opaque object from the source of light. If an object is closer to the source of light, then we are going to have a bigger shadow. But if it is far away from the source of light, then we are going to have a small and lighter shadow. Is that okay? Now, I've told you that the size of the shadow is determined by the distance from the source of light. I think you've observed that. If you look at during day or in the afternoon, when the sun is overhead, you realize that the shadow will be very short, and it will be very short. But in the evening, when the sun is the other side, you will see the shadow when it is getting long. Please, if you get time, you can move out. You go outside your room and observe that. Try it in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Is that okay? So, number 2, we said the size of the shadow is determined by the distance of the opaque object from the source of light. Then, the third thing which I want you to note, when the source of light is nearer the opaque object, the shadow is big, short, and light. That is, when it is nearer the source of light, the shadow is big, short, and light. Is that okay? That is very important, because they will ask you, they always ask you, state what happens, the size of the shadow in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. Let's move to the next one. When there are many sources of light, many shadows which are lighter are formed. When there are many sources of light. Is that okay? When there are many sources of light, many shadows which are lighter are formed. For example, if there is a bulb here, another bulb, when there are many, you'll see many shadows that were formed, but with a lighter shadow. Is that okay? We proceed. A shadow is formed in the direction opposite to the source of light. Is that okay? A shadow is formed in the direction opposite to the source of light. Now, let me give you a simple illustration here and see how you can fail properly. Now, this is what can happen. They can ask you, this is the source of light, okay, and let's assume this is the sun. Then I draw my, let me use, what should I use? Let me use a simple illustration of a ball, okay. Then they ask you to draw the shadow. They ask you to draw the shadow. Now, you must be very careful. Where do you draw the shadow? You draw it here. If you draw it in that position, that is wrong. And if you draw it here, then that is still wrong. What if you draw it in that position? Then this one is Okay. What if you draw it here? Again, this is not correct. If you draw it here, not correct. Yeah? That is if they ask you to draw the shadow of the ball. Be careful. Be careful there. I've told you a shadow is formed in the direction opposite to the source of light. Is that okay? Be careful. If this question is common in P3, P2, but they can bring it for you with the candidate and you fail. So be careful. Where do you draw it? In that position. A shadow is formed in the direction opposite to the source of light. This is the source of light, and opposite the source of light is this side. Okay, so when you draw it from this region here, that is correct. They can mark you. Is that okay? Now, when the source of light is in the east, where will be the shadow? The shadow will be in the west. Is that okay? And when the source of light is in the north, the shadow will be in the south. Please take note of that. Take note of that. We are saying if the source of light is in the north, then our shadow will be in the west. I mean to be in the south. And if the source of light is in the east, then the shadow will be in the west. That's what we are concluding with. We are saying when the source of light is in the east, the shadow is in the west. And when the source of light is in the north, the shadow is in the south. That is very important for you to take note. Now, let's look at the uses of shadows. One, a shadow helps in telling direction. A shadow helps in telling direction, and we want to see how that can be done. Then a shadow shadows help us to tell direction, to tell time, by the way. It helps us to tell time, and they provide shade. They can also be used for protection. If you are under sky, you can hide somewhere, and once you see shadows, you become alert. You should know that someone is maybe, or something is moving around, and you get ready for that thing which is moving around. So those are the uses of shadows. Maybe there are more other uses. When you get them, feel free and you add if you get more from your textbooks. That's a gentleman who was enjoying the shade. Okay, so shadows provide shade. Then moving on, we said a shadow helps in telling direction. You can see that. You can easily find direction. Get to know, because we all know that the sun sets it rises from the east, and then finally we see it's setting in the west. The SST will tell you that better. Then we need to look at the disadvantages of shadows. They cause fear, and some can lead to accidents. Okay, if you're not aware of that, you can move in a place full of shadows, not knowing there is a big hole. When you land there, you can get fractures. You can as well get bruises and so on. Now let's see the next one. We said shadows cause fear. Okay, that's a gentleman who was scared of a certain shadow. Then we said they can lead to accidents. We can move the next one, where we said shadows can lead to accidents. That okay? Yeah. So that is it. Now, after that, we need to move on and look at something else. That is the eclipse. Now, eclipse, by the way, that question came in 2017, PLE. Yes, it came in 2017. That was PLE. If you have that paper, you can check. There was a number about eclipse. Now, we have what we call the solar system. Now, the solar system has got 9 planets. I will not dig deep into those planets because that is now secondary. You look at that in geography when you go to Senior 2, Senior 3, you will see that. Now, the solar system has got 9 planets, and today I'm just going to look at the 3, that only the 2 mainly, that is the Sun and the Earth. Is that okay? Now, an eclipse is formed when the Moon, the Earth, and the Sun come in line, or when they line up, then an eclipse will be formed. For example, if you look at that illustration on the board, we are seeing the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth. So when they come in line, it will block the light, and the shadow will be formed on the other, or let's say on the Earth. That is, for example, if it is the Moon blocking the light from the Sun, then the shadow will be seen on the Earth. And if it is the Earth blocking the light from the Sun, then the Earth's shadow will be seen on the Moon. That is an eclipse. It is formed when the Moon, the Sun, and the Earth come in line. But remember, the Sun does not move. It is centered. Then it is other planets that keep on revolving, that keep orbiting the Sun. Is that okay? Now, let's see that still. That is how the Moon moves around the Earth. The Moon moves around the Earth, and the Earth moves around the what? The Sun. Now, the Sun actually is the biggest planet there, and it has lived for about now 4,603 billion years. When I talk about billion years, I think you know. And its diameter, that is in the diameter of Gambuuze, it is estimated that is 1,391,016 kilometers. That is of Gambuuze. Okay, meaning it's about 1 million Earths can fit in the Sun. Bw'oyagala okufuna obugazi bw'enjuba olina okukwata ensi million namba bisobole nga oteekamu bw'oti in order to fit in the Sun. I think you can see how big the Sun is. So the Moon, when it is moving, it revolves, or it moves around the Earth, and it is the Earth that moves around the what? The Sun. You know that when the Moon makes a complete revolution, chetuyita omwanka, meaning the Earth takes about 365 days to revolve the Earth. The Sun. Okay? Enjuba okugenda nga yeetoloola bwetu, nga yeetoloola, the Earth okwetoloola n'emalayo enjuba ziba ennaku 365 and some days there. Kyetuyita nti omwanka guweddeyo, kitegeeza enjuba yeetolodde n'emalayo. I'm confusing it. Kitegeeza the Earth eba yeetolodde n'emalayo bulungi. Is that okay? Now let's move on and look at actually what we are trying to talk about. We said an eclipse. An eclipse is a natural shadow formed when light from the sun is obstructed by either the moon or the earth. Is that okay? Or is a shadow formed on either the moon or earth when the sun, the moon, and the earth come in a straight line. That is what we call an eclipse. So meaning the shadow is formed on two bodies, that is the moon or the earth. Please take note of that. And we have three types. We have the solar eclipse, we have the lunar eclipse, and we also have the annular eclipse. Those are the three types: solar eclipse, the lunar eclipse, and the annular eclipse. Now, let's start with the solar eclipse. Now, solar eclipse is the type of eclipse that occurs when the moon comes in between. I want you to desist from using the word middle. It's not actually in the middle, but this is the type of eclipse that occurs when the moon comes in between the sun and the earth. Please take note of that. When the moon comes in between the sun and the earth. This is our sun, the moon, and the earth. Is that okay? That is the arrangement. The sun, the moon, and the earth. So it's the type of eclipse that occurs when the moon comes in between the sun and the earth. Now, the moon will block the light from the sun, and a shadow will be formed on the earth. Now, not that the whole earth will be blocked, it will be in total darkness, no. Because the moon is smaller than the earth. Omwezi mutono nnyo 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 nnyo. In fact, it is about 4,000 times. If you want to get the size of the earth, kanoboka kubisa mirundi nga mitwalo ena. Okay? 4,000 times. That is in order if you want to get the size of the earth. I'll give you the size of the earth before we end our lesson. So the shadow will be seen on the earth. And that is where we see some few parts, not all. In Uganda here, it is common in Kapchora. No. Is it Pakwach? Those ends, it is in the north, in Pakwach. People always go there to see the eclipse. With the solar eclipse, this one occurs during day. And during solar eclipse, the moon's shadow is cast on the earth. And I've told you that since the moon is smaller than the earth, its shadow can not fully cover the earth. Is that okay? Therefore, part of the earth is under umbra and another part is under penumbra. Now, this is what I want to show you here. I have the globe here for you. Now, we take, this is the earth, and we have our moon right there, and we have the source of light. Now, when you bring them in line, or when this one comes in line with the earth, now you see that a shadow if you're able to see the shadow, a shadow will be formed on the earth. So it does not fully cover the earth, but just some few parts. Okay, one part will be under umbra, and the other part will be under penumbra. Hope you're able to see that shadow well. Let me change it a bit. So that is what happens with the solar, with what we call solar eclipse, or eclipse of the what? Of the sun. Now the moon will keep on revolving around the what? The earth. This one keeps on what? Revolving. This one revolves around the what? The earth, like that. And when the moon come in line with the sun, the moon's shadow will be seen on the earth. It will be cast on the earth. And when it continues, neja eno, meaning this is the source of light, or this is the sun. So the earth's shadow will be seen, or will be cast on the moon. That is again another type of eclipse, and that is what we call the lunar eclipse, or eclipse of the moon. And since the moon is smaller than the earth, so the moon will be in total darkness. This one is bigger, this one is small. So what will happen here, the moon will be in total darkness. That is during the solar eclipse. Now let me take you through those illustrations. I need to show you different illustrations, and all this is to help you understand better what solar eclipse is. Now that is what happens. You can see, you can imagine the size of the moon. So when it moves and blocks the light, actually some light from the sun, the shadow will be cast on the earth. Then let's proceed and look at that also. Just look at that, and you're going to see how solar eclipse occurs. So that is, they say that the distance from the moon to the earth is about 384,400 kilometers. That is the distance. Bw'oyagala kuva ku nsi kuno ogende ku mwezi, obw'olina otambula kilometers 384,400 kilometers. Is that okay? Those are about 239,000 miles. Bw'oba oyagala okutuuka ku mwezi, that is what you are supposed to move. Then they say the earth orbits the sun 1,000 times. Is that okay? Now those are all facts that you will learn as you proceed to different levels, and they're very interesting. That's why I encourage you to take up sciences when you go to O level. Now let's look at more illustrations about solar eclipse. That's a nice one for them to see. So that is how solar eclipse occurs. The moon blocks the light from the sun, and the shadow will be seen on the earth. We can give them another illustration. That is also another illustration. We proceed. I think that one is clear, showing you the shadow when it is cast on the earth. Not the whole earth, but just some few areas. Then we proceed to the next one. That is now the second type, which is annular eclipse, or what we call eclipse of the moon. Eclipse of the the moon. That's the type of eclipse where the earth comes between the sun and the moon. Now what is between it is the earth. It occurs when the earth is between the sun and the moon. That one occurs at night. It mainly occurs at night. And during lunar eclipse, the earth's shadow is cast on the moon. Hope that is very clear. And since the earth is bigger than the moon, remember I've told you and I've shown you exactly what is here. Okay? Since the earth is bigger than the moon, then its shadow fully covers the moon. Its shadow fully covers what? The moon. Just imagine the size of the earth. Okay? And if you bring it behind, the earth is bigger. I'm using this to illustrate. This is, I'm not saying this is the earth, but I'm using an example of a globe. So when you bring it behind, you look at the size of the moon. So the earth's shadow fully, it will fully cover the what? The moon. Meaning the moon is under total darkness. It is under umbra. Let's look at the next one there. And I told you it occurs it occurs at night. That is okay. Now, lunar eclipse occurs more frequently than solar eclipse. It occurs more frequently than solar eclipse. Now let me give you the illustrations for lunar eclipse. You need to see them before we run out of time. So that is when the earth is between moon and the sun. Yeah, let's continue such that they're able to see clearly what happens there. So we have the earth, we also have the moon. And I told you the moon revolves around the earth and the earth revolves the sun, or it orbits the sun. Is that okay? Now, that is another illustration. That's another illustration if you are asked to draw. The earth is blocking the light from the sun and the moon is under the umbra, which is the darkest region. Is that okay? We give them another illustration. That is lunar eclipse. We can give them another one. Yeah, you can imagine that the sun, the arrangement, please don't forget the arrangement is the sun, earth, then moon. But the moon is completely under umbra. It is fully covered by the earth's shadow. Now, I want you also to look at that. That's another drawing for lunar eclipse. Don't forget the arrows. They are very important. Don't forget the arrows. They are very important. We proceed to the next one. That's a nice video for them as well. Now, let's look at that. That is a lunar eclipse, and it's showing you how the moon moves around the what? The earth. Have you ever realized that there are days when we see that the moon goes there, but it's a half of it. You see just a quarter of it. Then from somewhere we see it. We see. You can look at the. Let us observe the different shapes of the moon. Look at the first quarter. We can observe when it is a full moon in the third quarter. Now, why do we see just a quarter of the moon? Because the other parts, or another part, is covered, or it is taken up by the Earth's shadow. Okay? And as it moves out, it orbits and moves completely where there is no shadow, then we shall see now the full moon. Lastly, quickly, that is the lunar annular eclipse. It's where the moon's umbra shadow fails to reach the earth. There are times when the moon's umbra shadow fails to reach the earth. That is what we call the annular eclipse. And this is because by that time the moon is very far away from the earth. That's why it doesn't reach the what? The earth. And during annular eclipse, the moon is between the sun and the earth. So when annular eclipse occurs, a ring of light is seen around the sun. We always see a ring of light around the sun. Let me show you that. That is what we call a ring of light. And we can proceed to the next one. Those are people who are seeing the ring of light, and that is annular eclipse. By drawing, if you're asked to draw, that is what you're supposed to draw. Take them to, that is what you're supposed to draw. The umbra shadow is not supposed to reach the what? The earth. So you can draw that if you're asked to draw. Lastly, use your phone, take a screenshot. That is the activity. Please do it, and you feel free to send on our usual lines. Okay, you can also send it on our school kit. This work, I'm going to post it on the school kit. Don't forget to visit our school kit. All the work is there. If you have missed anything, all the videos, I'm going to post them on the school kit. I want to thank you so much for attending the lesson. I must say, God should bless you. We are waiting for the president on Saturday to see whether we are going back to school or not. Ssaabasajja Kabaka awangale.
Bw'osomeseza omwana wo mu masomero ga Giant Schools omuli kampasi y'Ebombo Kalule n'ey'e Kabalagala, toba na bweraliikirivu bwonna olw'omusingi okutambuzibwa ebyenjigiriza n'ensoma y'abayizi ey'omulembe. Mu masomero gaffe gano gonna tusomesa arts ne sciences okuviira ddala ku siniya esooka okutuuka ku siniya ey'omukaaga, nga tusomesa abaana okuviira ddala ku mutendero gwa kindergarten okutuuka ku kibiina eky'omusanvu. Tulina abasomesa abakugu mu kubangula abaana n'okubateekateeka. Ebyo bibiina abaana mwe basomera eby'omulembe omuli buli kimu ekikwata ku ebyo bye basoma.